Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm Debbie Schwartz, founder of Road to College and Paying for College 101 Facebook group. Great. Let me make sure that everybody who's in the waiting room can get in. So tonight, I'm going to talk about merit scholarships, what they are, how you search for them, how you build a college list, and everybody is here. This is a meeting instead of a webinar. It's just nice to see people's faces. And I also, if you feel like you want to unmute and ask a question, I am perfectly fine with that as well. So that's why we do them in this meeting format. I'd love to just get started before I pull up my slides. Just get a feel for who's watching. I mean, I'm sure most of you have seniors right now, so kind of you're getting a little anxious. It's middle of September, and early decision deadlines are coming up November 1st. There's a few that are October 1st. So I completely understand how now's the time to act. And but so I'd love to also know, in addition to what year your student is, like where you are in the process. Have you started a college list? Has your student started their essay? Just kind of to give me a sense. And if you're still working on the college list, that is perfectly fine. I find that to the last minute, which is okay. I mean, families usually have the basics of a list, and then they kind of keep adding in and deleting. And sometimes, depending on if student is applying early decision and what the results are, they kind of like scrap everything in some ways if the student doesn't get in, and kind of comes up with a new plan in December. So this is like an iterative process till the very end, till all the deadlines are over. So let's see where people are at. My senior has a college list and a Common App is almost done. That's great. First deadline is October 15th. Yep, there are some early deadlines. Third child, my son is a junior out of the looking for a major merit. Okay, well, actually, I am thrilled if you are here and you do have a junior, because you are so far ahead of the game, which is excellent. And you will understand the process. You will understand what schools they might be trying to get into. You will understand the numbers of, what the schools are looking for. So that is perfect if you're a junior. Great. Oh, I love to see all these juniors. I love that the seniors are here too, but I'm very impressed and excited that we have families with juniors. Okay, so I'm gonna get started and share my screen. Let me just move things around a bit. Okay. And let me share. So if somebody could just give me a thumbs up, just want to make sure that you can see the screen. Yes. Is that a thumbs up, or Corey, you asking a question? Okay, thanks. So tonight, we're ultimately, we're talking about building a list, but for most people, oh, sorry, let me just ask. Yes, this is recorded, and you will be sent the link to the recording sometime tomorrow. So we are building a college list. Hopefully you guys recognize, and to me, the college list is the pivotal step in the process, right? And I'm going to say this a few times throughout the discussion tonight, but the college list defines everything. It's going to define ultimately your family's cost of college, right? Because depending on what college you put on the list, it defines where you might get money and what your final costs are going to be. The college list defines what schools your student is going to get into or not, and what money they might get. So this list is kind of like the point at which, like, to some extent, there's the point of no return, right? Between the list and the deadlines, once that's in, it's a lot harder to be applying to schools after all these deadlines. I'm not going to say it's not possible at all. There are some schools that have open deadlines and some schools that, you know, are always looking for students. But for the schools where most people and students want to go, they have deadlines. And if you don't apply by the deadlines, you know, you're not going to be in the class. You're not going to be in consideration. So that's why this list is so important. Okay, so tonight we're going to talk about merit scholarships. We're going to talk about why it's important to understand your EFC. And this is great for those families who are juniors. And all the senior families, you have to know your EFC. If you don't know it now, you're going to know it by middle of October when FAFSA comes out. Oh, somebody's saying I'm fading in and out. Is that for everybody? Can most people hear me? Okay, so thanks. Thank you. We're going to talk about how you build a balance list, and then we're going to show you College Insights, which is a tool that we created to make the college search, and particularly looking for colleges with merit scholarships, a lot easier. Okay, so again, ultimately, why are we doing this tonight? Why are we building lists? I mean, yes, we're trying to find the school that's going to match our student academically and socially, but it has to match them financially, right? And so there's only so many ways that families that you have money to pay for college. Either you have savings, you know, which it would be great if all of us did. And if you don't have savings, or even with your savings, a lot of times families are taking from their current income to put towards college. So that's the bucket called family contribution. I'm going to skip to the end. Well, actually, okay. So there's family contributions. There's free money. And that's what a lot of what we're talking about tonight. Free money comes from either the college giving your student money because of your family's financial need, or because of their academics, and they're giving merit scholarships, or free money could come from private scholarships and government grants. Private scholarships are not out of the question. It's just a lot more work to get private scholarships. And the saying that we like to say is that the largest scholarship your student will most likely receive is from the college that they go to. So if you research and put the right colleges on your students list and they get in and they get offered money, that's going to be the largest scholarship that they're going to receive, as opposed to going after private scholarships. Of course, you hear in the news, there's, you know, students who win, you know, the large 4-year scholarships. It definitely happens, but as a percentage, it is very small. The majority of students who receive any sort of scholarship money towards school, it's coming from merit scholarships directly from the college. And then lastly, if you don't have enough money from family contributions, and even if you do get money from free money sources, if there is still a gap, you have to decide if you're going to borrow money. And that borrowing is either going to come from the government, or it's going to come from private lenders. Okay. So I kind of already stressed this, but approaching the college search strategically is so important. As I mentioned before, the college list drives your family's final costs of college. It's going to drive where your students ultimately going to be accepted. And it also, for those seniors and that summer before senior year and the fall of senior year, it drives how much work your student has to do. I saw a comment in the Paying for College 101 group, I think it was today or yesterday, and a mother said, maybe I'm missing this, why are people going so crazy over essays? What's the big deal? And for some students, it is truly not a big deal. And for other students, it is. It really comes down to what your student's college list is. So if your student is applying to some of the more selective schools, it doesn't have to be the Ivies, but it could be maybe a school, and I hate to use the rankings, but it's just a frame of reference, maybe in the top, 40. And if those schools have supplements, and if they're applying to honors programs, a lot of those things all have essays. And so the essays add up. That's the work. If your student is applying to maybe some less selective schools and some of the state schools, then they might just have just the common essay, the personal statement of the common essay. And that isn't so much work. So it varies. And I can understand why that mother was asking, because that student just, didn't have the same type of a college list. So they didn't have the same pressure of the essays as another student might. So that's just something to think about. And ultimately, here's another saying we have a lot. You can't get money from a college you don't apply to. So this is, again, a lot of stories that we hear or comments from families, usually in that February through April timeframe when students are getting accepted and they're hearing about different scholarship monies. And a parent will say, boy, I didn't know that that school gave out, merit scholarships. My students should have applied there. Or it's actually just the opposite. A family will say, I thought we were going to get money, but we didn't get any. And it's because they ended up not really understanding the financial aid policy of the colleges, and they didn't do their research ahead of time. So that's actually the worst situation, which I'm trying to help you guys avoid. I don't want you to kind of say next, if you're a junior family and even if you're a senior family, to say in the springtime, oh, I wish my child had applied to this school because they would have gotten more money. It's a little bit too late. So that's why there's the saying, you can't get money from a school you don't apply to. Okay, so merit aid. And I do see some of your questions, and I'm gonna flip back and forth, but so it's not that I'm ignoring the questions, but I want to get through a little bit more before I answer some of them. So what is merit aid? Really, in its most basic level, merit aid is a form of a discount. It's called merit aid. It's called merit scholarships. It's a discount that the colleges are offering in the form of a scholarship, and it's to attract a certain student that they want academically, usually, sometimes with certain talents that they want to come to that school. So, it's they're luring them or with extra money. So most scholarships, most merit scholarships are renewable. That's why it's so important that you do the research now. Merit scholarships aren't usually given to sophomores, juniors, and seniors. You have to come in with the merit scholarships, and then the merit scholarships are usually given. If you receive it as part of the admissions process, the merit scholarship is available for freshman, sophomore, junior year. That's a big deal, right? And they also usually require some sort of a minimum GPA. We get into more detail about this in the wintertime, but when the offers and merit scholarships come in, it's very important to look at the details about, are there certain requirements to make it renewable? Some minimum GPAs are pretty easy. They could be a 3.0, but some merit scholarships actually do come with a minimum GPA of 3.5. And so you just want to be cautious and careful about knowing what those minimums are. Have a discussion with your student. Is it possible, is there any concern about making those minimum GPAs? And the reason why I pointed out is because, again, the worst situation is if a student goes to a college and a family figures out that college is affordable because of the merit scholarships. And then if that student loses a merit scholarship, then that school all of a sudden becomes very expensive and it may not be affordable. So you want to factor all those things in when your student is deciding on a school and potentially accepting merit scholarships. And then the last point, which, I wish it wasn't this case, but the reality is that merit scholarships are usually a flat dollar amount. So whatever they offer the student as part of the admissions process, could be anywhere like from $5,000, $8,000, $25,000, $27,000. That is usually the same every amount. I don't think I've ever seen a merit scholarship that says it will increase at the same rate as the tuition increases. That would be great. But again, I point these out for planning purposes when you estimate out the 4-year costs, which you may not be doing yet, but that's a session that we have later on. And you should be estimating not just what it's going to cost for 1 year, but what it's going to cost for 4 years. The reality is tuition increases. I mean, we all know what's happening with inflation. I think that for the first year of the pandemic, there were a lot of schools that kept things flat. Even then there were schools that increased. That was probably the lowest increase I'd seen, usually around 3% before the pandemic. The increases could be closer to 5%. I have seen some increases, unfortunately, of like 8 or 9%. So that's something to research to see what type of increases the school has made to tuition, and you have to factor in some sort of estimate going forward for the 4 years. So question here, flat dollar scholarships never increase, but if your student gets a full tuition scholarship, that will be for all 4 years generally had one. Yes, that's the case. So thank you, Andrew, for explaining that. If there is a full tuition scholarship that covers, the tuition for the full 4 years, regardless of what the increases might be. So I just want to mention this word, enrollment management. You may or may not come across it, but it's the word that's being used these days, kind of in replacement for the admissions office. Because if you think about it from a business standpoint, the admissions office, its function is to manage enrollment, right? They are attracting students, they are deciding who's going to attend, and they ultimately have to make they have to meet some sort of tuition or revenue goals, right? It's just like a business. This is to some extent the marketing or acquisition department, and they are pulling in new students with both the hope of creating a class that meets some institutional priorities and academic priorities, but ultimately has to meet the college's financial priorities. So they have to try and bring in some students that are maybe paying full price, some school students that they can give aid to, some that are in the middle, and that whole mix of different students paying different prices has to add up to a revenue or tuition revenue for that school. So that's really kind of the role that the admissions officers are playing these days. They are not just reading applications and making decisions. They are, but they're doing much more than that. So in looking at students, colleges are trying to recruit. They're accepting students. They're giving them awards, and they're hopefully they're waiting to make sure that students accept and then ultimately enroll in the college. And I found this quote on I think actually a lot of consultants' website who works with colleges, and it was advice that they were giving to colleges, and they were saying you need awarding strategies. Awarding strategies is their term for giving out the money, whether it's need-based or merit scholarships. You need awarding strategies that address need and willingness to pay. Doing this successfully means that you have to understand the price sensitivity of the various student populations you hope to recruit. We don't kind of always like to make or think about college in these ways, but the closest analogy from a business standpoint is colleges are very much like the airline industry. The cost of your seat, you might have got it last minute, good price, because you didn't whatever, you found it. You could be sitting next to somebody who's paying business class or business price, and you could be also sitting next to somebody who bought their ticket 3 months in advance, who was very had planned a lot, and they have a different price. So we know that everybody on that airline, their seats, they're paying completely different prices. And to some extent, that is these days what college is about. There are some students that are paying full price, some students that are get a lot more aid, some students that are getting merit scholarships. And the colleges, we're going to talk about it a little bit further. Most colleges, there's a small percentage of colleges that don't do this, but a lot of colleges are factoring in a family's, as they said, sensitivity to price. And their willingness to pay. So, a college is definitely looking at your students' characteristics. So they are looking at some things that your student can't impact, and some things they can impact. Obviously, the gender, their gender is their gender. Their ethnicity is what it is, but that's still something that the college takes into account. So there's your student characteristics, some things they can change and impact, and some things they can't. The things that they can impact is the GPA. Obviously by senior year, not so much, but for those families here, but with juniors, there's still a possibility of impacting the GPA. Your student can definitely impact demonstrated interest if that's important to a college. And so again, there's the things that they can impact and things that they can't impact. The other bucket of characteristics are institutional goals. These are things you will never, sometimes you might be able to figure out, a lot of times you won't be able to figure out. And again, you won't be able to have impact on this. It could be the school has, as I mentioned, like certain tuition revenues that it has to meet. It might have a certain head count that it's trying to pull in. It might want a certain number of students in a particular major because they might be, building up a particular major. They might be realizing that they want to cut a certain major, so they don't want that many students in with that interest. So these are all of the colleges, goals, which unfortunately we may not always know. If you want to dig into trying to figure this out, you can dig around this college's website. They might have their mission statement that would give you a little bit of certain institutional goals. Sometimes you can get financial records of the college and write-ups of their board meetings. Depends how much you want to dig. Some of that stuff is available, and that will usually give you an insight into what their goals are. And then the third category is what I call environmental trends. Again, things you may not really be able to impact. But for example, there's a lot of talk in the college admissions world about the demographic cliff. I think it's in 2026, the number of 18-year-olds significantly declines. I mean, that was based on birth rates from 18 years before that. So there's the demographic trends that they see are coming that might impact the college's goals. As we know, there are political impacts, which we had, a year ago, we would not have thought would be so dramatic, but they will probably have impacts this year. There are competitive trends. So schools are competitive against each other, just like businesses are. So if one school, might see
Fail to detect your speaker. Make sure your speaker is properly connected.
Sorry, is it? Can you not
got me?
hear me?
What happened with that?
Oops. Okay. I don't know. Can everybody still hear me? I don't know if that person is telling me that. Okay. Thank you. I thought everything was fine. So I think you get the idea. I'm going to move on. There are some things that you can impact and some things that you can't. Some things maybe you can find out about that would be helpful. But it's just to be aware. The reason why I bring this up is to also, when your student may not get into a school that you thought was perfect for them and you thought they met all the criteria and everything like that, it's just that there might be issues beyond your student's control. It could have been an institutional goal reason why they weren't chosen. It could have been environmental trends. The school might have wanted more students from the Southwest as opposed to the Northeast. So I think we need to, of course, our students are going to be disappointed, but we need to also explain to them that some of these things are just out of their control and they can't take these decisions personally. Okay. Let's get more into merit aid. So there's three categories of what merit aid. This isn't anything official. This is kind of more of what we've come up with as an easy way as a framework to understand merit aid. There's what I call automatic, competitive, and talent. Automatic merit aid means that usually the schools, and we'll show you some examples, have charts on their websites that clearly lay out that if your student has a certain GPA or a certain test score, that they will be eligible for a certain merit dollar amount. And we wish that all schools were like that. They make it pretty transparent about how their process works. And they usually include that information in their net price calculator if you're using the net price calculator on the college's website. As the name implies, these schools, if your student applies to a school that has automatic merit aid, there's nothing else that they need to do. They just need to send in the application. There's not a separate application that they need to write. There's not a separate essay. It's just everybody who applies to that school is going to be considered for merit aid that school awards. Then the next category is competitive merit aid. This type of merit aid usually has a separate application. It might even have a separate essay that needs to be written, and you have to actually apply for this merit aid. And the other thing that's really important, particularly about competitive and talent-based merit aid, is they're usually very strict deadlines around it. So, and I'll show you an example, but competitive merit aid, there might be a separate deadline to apply for the merit aid scholarships that is different than the regular admissions deadline. So again, it's really important to pay attention to the deadlines, to the details. And for those families with juniors, it's perfect that you're doing this research now. So you won't, you won't get stumbled by missing a deadline since you're researching so far in advance. And then kind of the way, again, what the name implies, a talent-based merit aid is usually a school that, it's talent for music, for theater, for art, for dance. These types of awards are granted a lot of times based on an audition or sending in a portfolio. And again, there are deadlines related to those types of awards. So there might be a deadline for scheduling the audition. There might be a deadline for sending in the portfolio. And I can guarantee you that those deadlines are not the same deadline as the regular application. So again, be aware of all the deadlines. So here's an example of the type of chart that you might see on a school's website. This is for automatic merit aid. It is the Miami University. And I've been doing these types of presentations for a few years, so I have a few years worth of examples. So actually, it starts in the bottom right-hand corner from 2020. This was what was on Miami University's website. Back then, it was before the pandemic. They had a requirement that you had to have certain test score and a certain GPA level. And if you had those combinations, then you could see it was pretty clear how much they were going to offer based on whether you were Ohio resident or a non-resident. So that was pretty clear. In 2021, that was the first year of the pandemic. They took away any reference to SAT or ACT scores. They just went on GPA. And you can see they shift their dollar amount a little bit. This is their own modeling that they do behind the scenes to determine. This goes back to the statement about price sensitivity. So they're trying to figure out how do we attract the students that we want to with certain academics, and how much do we have to offer them to make it attractive that they'll want to come to us. And then we move to bottom left here, which is 2022. And again, you can see, and I know that this is a question that comes up, and Miami University made it pretty clear that they use a weighted high school GPA. And again, they shifted the GPA bands. So the highest was now moved up. So you had to have a 4.3 or higher. They shifted the dollar amounts. Doesn't look like they're giving full tuition anymore. So this is what happens year to year that, again, you don't necessarily have control over, but this is why it's important to do the research, and you have to be on top of what they're offering in the current year. And then above here is this current 2023. It looks like pretty much they stayed the same from last year. So that was good. Yeah, so Stephanie said, yeah, that's a huge shift. Yep. This is going back to that term enrollment management that I mentioned. Enrollment management is also colleges working with a lot of outside consultants. And just as in any business these days, they are gathering data. They are gathering data both on last year's students and kind of which students accepted their offer at which dollar prices and what type of academic profile that student had. So it's kind of like, how did our strategy work last year? And should we make changes for that strategy this year? So it's a lot of modeling that's actually going on behind the scenes to come up with these charts. Do schools ever deviate from these charts? Usually not. If a school has these charts published, then they don't deviate from it. But there's a lot of schools that give out merit. And I guess actually, maybe I should alter my example or the definition. There are a lot of schools that give out automatic merit, but they don't have these charts. So it's a little bit more unknown how much they're going to give. And they do that honestly for their own discretion. So they are giving out merit, but they don't want to be held to a chart. And to some extent, that's probably the majority of colleges. Again, if there's a college that shows a chart, I think that, we should, applaud them. They're being as transparent as possible. And we wish that more colleges were like that. So do senior year grades count? That's actually another really good question. I think yes and no. I'm going to answer that, Susan. And the reason is that if your student, and so if you're most likely, it could be just, it depends when your student applies. If your student is applying early admission, then the senior grades don't apply because the colleges don't even have the senior grades. If the colleges have the senior grades in time by the time that they are reviewing applications, then the first semester grades may play a part. Most likely, they are just going by the transcript that is sent from the school, as part of the application, or when your student fills in and self-reports their grades on the Common App. The reason why I say sometimes is that there's been a few cases where a student missed, a band, let's say, I'll just say an example here that there was a student that had that, 4.29 and didn't get the top merit award. And when they were aware of that, and if they were then factoring in their latest semester grades and then move them to the higher 4.3 range, then in that case, the school might be willing to look at the senior year, first semester grades. So I think there's a little bit of leeway, so it just, but I can't say if it's every school's policy. Okay, so here's an example for competitive merit aid. This happens to be the example on the left is from USC. The reason why I like to show it is that USC, actually, I should have updated. Oh, yes. So USC has a December 1st deadline if you're applying regular decision, and if you want to apply for the merit scholarship. So it's December 1st, but their regular decision deadline is January 1st. And if you're applying for merits, if you're applying for early action, then it's a November 1st deadline for merit scholarship. So here's a case where the merit scholarship deadline is different than the actual admissions deadlines. And then the same thing for the other example here on the right happens to be Boston University. They have a separate application that you need to fill out, and they don't have a grid, and they don't tell you more specifics about how they're going to select people, except they have this 2 lines in their website that say, though tests are not required, students who submit scores typically have an SAT score, in this case, above 1500, or an ACT score of 33. So that's also been a big question with a lot of schools going test optional. Are test scores needed for merit scholarships? And a lot of schools are not making it required, but I can't say that that's a universal policy. So there are some schools that might be test optional, so they will accept your students without test scores, but they require the tests for merit scholarships. So again, this is where understanding the details of each school's policy is so important. I highly recommend you go through the website, but in addition, there is no harm in having your student. These are great and easy questions for your students to both, contact their admissions rep and just say, I'm really interested in applying. Just want to make sure I know all the requirements for applying for merit scholarships. Do I need to have test scores to be evaluated for a merit scholarship? So unfortunately, we don't have like one universal database of that type of information because colleges are constantly changing their decisions. It's hard to find out. They don't have one place where that information is on a website. So that is the type of of research that you just need to do by asking the school's rep and looking at all the information on the website. So Laura's asking, does it mean that a 33 is accepted, or should it be above a 33? I think this phrase here is saying that it's most of the students, this is for the merit scholarship. Most of the students that BU gives merit scholarships to have a score that it's above a 33. Okay, so now I'm gonna shift a little bit and just talk about EFC. So just curious, anybody in the chat want to, you don't have to tell me your number, but just trying to get a sense if people have calculated their EFC. Do they have an estimate of what their EFC is? So let me see who out there knows their EFC. Yes, I have, and I've almost died. Completely understand that statement. First time, okay. Yep, yeah, so high it doesn't matter. Okay, I get it. Yes, ridiculous. Okay, so I'm not surprised. Most of the people here, you've done your EFC, and to some extent, for all the people that have, that I see your EFC number, quite honestly, if your EFC number is in the high 70s or above, it's kind of meaningless, but it's still important that you did it. And so for the person who asked, what is the EFC or where do you get it calculated? I'm not going to go into detail because that we actually have some sessions coming up in October with FAFSA where we talk in more detail about EFC. But basically, your EFC is calculated through the FAFSA, which is the government form, or through the college's own form, which is usually through what they call the CSS profile. And so that's the difference here. We have here FM and IM. So that's one is the federal methodology, and the other one is the institutional methodology. The federal methodology is from the FAFSA itself. The institutional methodology is through the CSS profile. And this just gives you a general idea of how the EFC is calculated. There's 4 quadrants. There is parent income, parent assets, student income, student assets. Usually the biggest, I should actually kind of like color this top quadrant, this left quadrant, a different color, because this top quadrant, the parent income, has the biggest impact on the EFC. As you can see, maximum assessment is 47% of adjusted gross income. And so that's a lot. That's huge. And so, again, if you're a family with juniors or maybe even family with sophomores in high school, depending on what your occupation is, you might be able to impact your income, if you, again, depending if you're a freelancer, if you get commissions, things like that, you might be able to change your base income, your base EFC, which is the first year that they use for financial aid, but it's really hard. So that's why when people talk about strategies for reducing your EFC, there are definitely strategies, but most of the families can't take advantage of it because the biggest driver of the EFC is your income. But there are ways of reducing it if you're on the edge. So if your income, and when I say the edge, if you're on the edge of having an EFC where a school may give you need-based aid or not, then there are strategies to look at how your assets are registered. If your student has income, if your student has assets, those things can be moved around a bit so that it can lower your EFC. But in all honesty, that's all I'm going to go into right now. But this is just to give you the sense of what the EFC is, because I'm going to reference it a little bit in the next slide. So the reason why it's important to understand your EFC is that it ultimately determines for a college whether or not you have financial need. And if you have financial need, you're going to want to look at colleges that give money for financial need. If you don't have financial need, then you need to look at colleges that are offering merit scholarships. And so you don't know if you have financial need if you don't know your EFC. So the basic calculation is COA, which is cost of attendance, which is what the college puts on their website as the cost of attendance, which includes tuition, room and board, and some estimated expenses. So they take that cost of attendance, they subtract what your EFC is, and I'll just give you an example. Let's say a school's cost of attendance is 60,000 and your EFC is 30,000. So that means you have a need, which is a financial need of 30,000. So in that situation, you would want to look, hopefully that school that had the $60,000 cost of attendance is also helping families by giving money towards financial need. And that's something we're going to have to research, but at least you know your starting point. At least you know, if my student is looking at that school, we have financial need, and I want to see if they're going to offer financial need to my student. They could still offer merit scholarships, but you want to see if they're going to give you need-based aid. And then for a lot of the families, which, you shared your EFC, quite honestly, I get it. And this is where, to some extent, your EFC is meaningless because it's high and because you're not going to have financial need at any of the schools. So the only way you're going to reduce tuition is by finding a school that's going to give your student merit scholarships. So that's why it's just important to understand where you fit, whether you're looking for need or you're looking for merit. And then you have to understand, does that college give need or does that college give merit scholarships? Okay. And then another question that comes into play is your family's ability to pay. And again, the reality is at a lot of schools, not all schools, at a lot of schools, the admissions office does take that into account. And so they are looking for school students. They're looking at the combination of what your students' academic attractiveness is, right? So how good is their academic profile, quite honestly, and then what is your family's ability to pay? So if your student is in the top 25% of that school's academic profile, right, that means that your student is pretty attractive to them. They want your student to come because, quite honestly, it will improve the overall rankings of the school. It will improve all of the stats of that school. So because your student has a good academic profile, and even better, if you have a high ability to be able to afford the cost of attendance, then that school is actually willing to give you more merit money because they want to make sure that you come because your student is both academically strong for them. And they also know that if they give you a little bit of merit money, that you have the potential of coming and you won't have any financial problems for paying for the rest of the 4 years, even, if they give you some financial, so if they give you some merit money. But, as you can see, unfortunately, that the less academically strong your student is, they might get some merit money, but probably they get less and less merit money. And even if you have a strong academic student, if you can't afford as much of the cost of attendance, you get money, but it's probably more need-based money as opposed to merit money. So, I'm going to guess that, all the families that said they had an EFC, again, in the high 70s or above, and this is not, I don't know anybody's financial situations. I am not saying you can truly afford college, but technically based on that EFC, the college is going to say, well, you can afford 100% of the cost of attendance. There's a difference between what the calculation means and says and what you can actually afford. But this is the formulas and the numbers that the colleges are looking at. So for the families, again, with those high EFCs, if you want to find schools that can give your student the most merit money, you're going to want to find schools where your student is at the top of their academic range. We go at the 75th percentile or above. And again, we'll show you how to do that. But this is just kind of the concept. Someone said, after all this, I'm telling my kids, sorry, go learn to become a plumber or fix AC. Okay, well, that's a whole nother discussion and that's a whole nother topic. But, for some students going to a trade school, there's nothing wrong with that. But but that's, your family's discussion. But, I can understand how you might feel that way. So yes, Laura's asking, what's the new Department of Education rule that the EFC can't be split across multiple students? What is happening with this? So I'll just touch on it. I don't want to get into details because there's too many details. But the way the EFC, the formula that is used today for EFC, there has been proposals through Congress to change it. The government determines the formula. So those changes are supposed to be in effect next year. There's a lot of people who highly doubt that it's going to be in effect because just of seeing the history of how the government implements these changes, they never work out on time. But in any case, one of the biggest changes that is disturbing a lot of people, which is completely understandable, is that today there is a question on FAFSA is that do you have other students in college at the same time? And if a family does, if they have multiple students in college at the same time, then the EFC, your expected family contribution, is distributed among those multiple students. So each student has actually a lower EFC than if there was just one student going to college at the time. That's the way it works today, but in the new proposal that is being removed. So that is very disturbing. A lot of people have been fighting that. I don't think that there has been movement to change that, the removal of multiple students in college at the same time, unfortunately. So my one tidbit of advice, and this is actually from a financial planner who suggested this to me the other day, and we're going to talk about that in the in the FAFSA presentations that we have planned for the end of the month, is that if you're a family that has multiple students in college at the same time, and we don't know when this change is going to into effect, it might be next year, it could be the year after, that you should run the EFC calculation today as if you have multiple students in school at the same time, and then you should run the EFC calculation as if you have one student in school at the same time, because that's going to be your EFC if these changes go into place. Not saying any of us are going to like it, but then you have the information to plan, because potentially whatever the cost of college is for you this year, if you have multiple students in school at the same time, it could drastically change if these changes to the EFC calculation go into effect. It could drastically change when that happens. So you should be prepared and aware. Okay. So here's a story. This is a true story. I'm going to read it from somebody in our Facebook group. And I'll tell you why I think it has good lessons. So this mother wrote, my son only got into 2 schools. He applied to 6 schools total, and 4 of them were reaches, meaning they were probably above where he could really be accepted academically. He got waitlisted at all 4 of those private schools. Of the 2 schools he got accepted to, only 1 is a real option because it is affordable. Now he's saying that he thinks that he picked the wrong school and that he should have cast a wider net, and he's very remorseful of all the decisions he made. He wants to go to his second choice school that he got accepted to. The problem is that school has an $82,000 price tag, which we did not qualify for any aid. So the reason why I read this story is for a few things. One is having options is so important. In this case, the student applied to 6 schools, which is on the slightly lower side, but of the 6 schools he applied to, 4 of them were reaches. That's risky, right? So he didn't have enough academic safety schools or target schools. It doesn't sound like they had also enough financial safety schools. So you have to have a balanced list. And what that means is it's fine for your student to apply to those reach schools. It's fine if you want to even let your student apply to that school where you're not quite sure you can afford it. It's going to depend if they give you money, or you might actually know off the bat that you can't afford it, but they just want to apply to see if they can get in. As long as you have these conversations before they apply, so that when the results come back, you're not dealing with the disappointment then. So it's really important to have options, and options only come from creating a balanced list. It's really important to understand whether or not how much you can afford. So I mentioned, we just had a discussion about what your EFC is. Important number to understand. Just as important as the EFC is to know what your family's college budget is. I can't tell you what that is. That's something your family has to come up with. And how you come up with is obviously you look at how much savings you have, how much you're willing to take from your current income to pay for college. Is there somebody else in the family, a grandparent or someone who's willing to contribute to college? And then quite honestly, the last thing is to decide how much you and your student are willing to borrow. I would hope that, you don't go overboard and you're not willing to borrow too much, but I mean, it's okay to decide that you're going to borrow, but just understand how much you're willing to borrow. And so with all of that together, that becomes your budget. Your budget can be a very different number than your EFC. And I should actually use this as a story next time in the presentation. Last spring, there was a parent who shared in the Paying for College 101 group. Her story is that she actually had a high EFC. They had a very high a high income. Obviously depending on where you are, where you live, that income may not go that far, but they had a probably an above average income. And in fact, I think she said her EFC was in the 80s. So she knew she wasn't going to get any need-based aid, but she had 4 kids to put through college. And this was her first. And they had decided that their budget was $35,000. And she found the schools where either her student could get enough merit scholarship, and based on the cost of attendance, it brought their cost down to $35,000, or it was just a lower cost school to begin with. So the point of her story is that her budget number was very different than her EFC, but the fact that she knew her budget and she factored it and she used it as part of the search, that's what made their search ultimately successful. So I'm not saying that every budget is going to be workable, and that that whatever your budget is, we can always find the school that matches it, but you should know that number in advance, so that you know how far off some of these schools are that your student is applying to, that from your own budget. So in this case, this family, the school had an $82,000 price tag. If they knew that they were never going to be able to afford that school, and my guess is, and that school, they knew that it was never going to offer their student merit scholarships, then I guess it's okay that their student applied, but then there should have been the understanding that you're just applying to see if you can get in because we can't afford it. Okay, I'm going to give you my tips, and then I'm going to switch to college insights. So some of these I've already talked about. Know your EFC, know your family budget. Understand as you look through colleges, are you looking for a college that's going to give you need-based aid, or are you purely looking for merit scholarships? This is really, for the juniors out there. Start with a wide net. Like, don't impose certain restrictions on what your search should be like. Start with a wide net in terms of, just look for schools based on your student's GPA or test score, and see, where they are, what schools does your student fit into the top 70th percentile, where are they at the top 25%? And then just see those schools. Sometimes people do a search and they say, my student only wants to be in the state of Florida. Their major is business, and they want a school that's 10,000 students or more. There may not be that school that fits that criteria and is going to give you merit scholarship. But if they didn't have such strict requirements, they might have found a school where might not have been ideal, but they could make it more affordable because they could get the merit. Okay, so that's why it's important to be open-minded, start with a wide net. I believe on a college search to always include your state school. State schools, or at least one state school, your in-state school. It's always going to be a pretty reasonably priced, obviously depending on what state you live in, but you kind of want to have that as one of the options. When all the decisions are in, at least hopefully your student can get into your state school and it's reasonably priced. Include what I call a leverage school. I'll go through this quickly. This goes back to the point about schools are competitive with each other. So if you can figure out, and we can't always with every school, but if you can figure out that there's a school that your student might be interested in, and that there's a similar school that school is competitive with, it might be worthwhile applying to both schools, because The ideal situation is if you can find a leverage school that ultimately gives your student more money, because then you have like bargaining power. When all the offers are in, you can go back to the other school that your student might really want to go to and say, my student wants to go here. It's their first choice, but they got into this other school and this other school gave them more money. So can you match it? The simplest way of trying to find a leverage school is another name is called a peer institution. And you can actually Google the school's name. Like an example, if you Google Tulane University peer institution, you will get, they have a section on their website that actually lists the schools that they consider their peer institutions. So sometimes that Googling works. There's another way of finding peer institution schools. That's through the government website called iPads. A little bit more too complicated to go into now, but if somebody wants to reach out to me, I can walk them through it separately. Do you need to get accepted admissions to both schools for leverage to be effective? Yes, you do. You need to be accepted to both schools, and you need to get an offer from the school that you want to use. It's just for negotiation purposes. So you need to get accepted, you need to get an offer to show it to the other school. Okay, and then finally, include financial safety schools. That's exactly the story that I just explained. Make sure you can do these estimations ahead of time to determine closely whether or not you can afford it. You're not going to be able to figure out what the final cost is to the penny of the school. That's for a lot of reasons, because you don't know the exact offer that they're going to give your student. The other big wrench in this is that we're basing costs on this year's, on 2022-2023 tuition, and the reality is that your cost is going to be based on, for the seniors, your cost is going to be based on the tuition for 2023-2024, and that hasn't even been published. That doesn't get published until the summer. So it's crazy, but you're never going to know your actual net costs until the tuition bill comes, but you can estimate hopefully within like a $5,000 range of what it could be before your student even applies. Does asking for a tuition freeze really work? I don't know if somebody had a comment earlier. I've never seen a family be able to ask for a tuition freeze and a college give it. So unfortunately, that does not work. If a college decides to freeze the tuition, that is usually a decision made at the board level. So they're not going to give it individually to families. Okay, I'm going to switch right now and let's jump into college insights. Okay. Okay, let me switch back. Okay, somebody just give me a heads up or something, or a thumbs up. Can you see this that says College Insights, or just put into chat? Yes. Okay, thanks. So if you want to go try out College Insights, here I'll just put the URL in the comments. Okay, but I'm going to walk you through it. You can go here and as we say, you can put 5 schools in for free and see, all the information. And then when you get further in, you can actually do a 7-day free trial. So there's a few different ways that you can get a sense of whether or not this will be helpful for you. If you put a college into the comment app, you'll see the, okay. Actually, I don't want to switch back to my slides, but there's one thing I realized one slide I forgot to go over, and that is the information that is in College Insights, where that information comes from. Let me log in and then I'll explain that to you. Okay, what I didn't show you is, because I already have a login, is that when you go through and you pick your 5 free schools, it asks you, your email address, whether you're a parent or a student, what the what grade you're in and what your 5 schools are. And then it will bring you to this screen and it will just show you your 5 schools. But the data that is in College Insights is a combination from 3 places. One is from the government, that's called iPads. There's some numbers here that we pull. The other big source is the Common Data Set. So the Common Data Set is information that colleges share. Most of them share publicly. This is the big story that was in the news from Columbia University, because Columbia didn't actually share their Common Data Set publicly for many years. They kind of were forced to do it this year, and they did. It's also the data that US News and World Report uses for their rankings, but it's a great source of information. And most, as I mentioned, most colleges do share it on their website, but there's not one place where you can kind of see it all together. So that's what we did. We pulled all that data together, we license it, and then we do some calculations on it to make it easier for you to kind of see what the important information is to look at. Okay, someone says, I can't see what you're displaying. Can you guys see? I can't see your shared screen. Yes, wait, you can see it? Yes, you can see it, but it's too small. Okay. It's up, it's fine. I can see it. Okay, okay, I'm gonna go. The majority of you can see it according to Zoom. I've shared this, so I don't know why the people who can't see it, so I apologize. Okay. Oh, and the third source of data that we have here is for the past 3 years, we have collected and crowdsourced data from families like you, all these families. When your student actually gets their offer, you share with us what they got. So we have actual offers from students at particular schools. So you can see, there's the data that the college says they're going to give a certain amount of money, and then did they actually give it to students? And so you can see, we don't have it for absolutely every school, but we have it for a lot of the most popular and top schools. So you'll be able to see that information. So honestly, there is tons of information here. It could be overwhelming, but I'm going to show you where to kind of focus. And you can jump from section to section by these tabs up top. So going down the left-hand side, there's 3 different ways you can search for college. Well, first, if you can, as you search for colleges, you can group them and create your own lists. You can name your lists. When you create your five colleges that you select at the beginning, it's going to be listed here as your trial college list. So that's your first list. But as you search and heart your colleges, you can name them anything you want. You could say, dad's favorite schools, or schools with business degrees that give the most merit scholarship, or you can make whatever names you want. So that's the first way you can search. The second way is you might have a particular schools that you're interested in. Maybe you just want to look up one school. You want to see, what Tulane is. You want to see all the information for Tulane. So you can just, type this in here. And then, pick Tulane. You can pick as many schools as you want. I don't know, 8, 9, 10 here. And then if you search, only information from those schools will show up. And then the last section down here is by preferences. And so I'll show you that. So Erin's asking, if we have a College Insights account for first kid, do we use the same account for second kid? Or you can use one College Insight account for many students. You do not need to get separate College Insights account for each student. What you might want to do is you'd probably name the lists differently for the specific for each student, but you can use the same account. Oh, my kid's school doesn't use SCORE or Naviance. Would this be a good option? I think that I think College Insights would be a good option instead of SCORE and Naviance. I think actually even having SCORE and Naviance, we have some better information than they do, but definitely if you don't have access to SCORE and Naviance, this is definitely worthwhile. Can you change the 5 schools within the trial? You can't change the 5 schools. So the 5 schools you pick are just the 5 schools that you can see. And then you can do the 7-day free trial, which you can see access to everything. And and then, if you want it more than 7 days, there's a monthly charge. Okay, so the preferences section. So let me go back to my comment where I said, start with a wide net if you're searching. So honestly, what I would do, with that in mind is I would just search by either the GPA or my student's SAT or ACT score. And let me just stop there for a second and backtrack. I know that there's this question about, well, test optional, right? So the reality is that we can only do so much with the data that we have. And let's go to academic stats. As you can see, even so, from a data perspective, colleges have been very good about collecting data about SATs and ACTs. They have all these percentiles. They have, the breakout of, obviously reading and writing, and they super score and all that type of stuff. So they have a lot of good, so if you want to search by ACT and SATs, most schools actually have that information, and you'll be able to, find out where your school fits, where your student fits. Believe it or not, for GPA, colleges have just not been that good. Maybe it wasn't as important from a data perspective. So you will see that a lot of schools do not report that information, and nobody can force them to. So and that's one thing. And the second thing is they only report an average GPA. So you can still search by the GPA, but the data isn't as robust as it is for SAT and ACT. And then the second thing about GPA, to be honest, is that the GPAs that are listed here are supposed to be, I say the word supposed to be, unweighted, but sometimes schools weight them, and we have a little noting. And sometimes schools, don't tell the common data set whether they've weighted it or not, and they just are actually showing a weighted GPA when it's supposed, and they don't identify it, and it's supposed to be unweighted. So the reality is that the GPA is just more unreliable. I am not saying ignore it. I'm saying do your searching all different ways, because you're going to see some colleges that don't have a GPA, and most colleges have the ACT, SAT, although I can see we're looking at some now that don't, but these are a lot more obscure colleges. Okay, and so the question is, if your student didn't take an SAT and ACT, how should you, what can you use to search by it? And what I recommend is to take your student's GPA, and I'm going to flip over here. I don't know if this shows up, and there's a few different places where you can convert your student's GPA to an ACT score or an SAT score. And okay, so I'm going to stop sharing and resharing, because some people are still saying that my screen is showing up black. So let me try one more time. Okay, how is this? Can somebody tell me?
Good.
Okay, thank you. So in terms of the ACT, SAT, what I recommend is, if your student hasn't taken one, first of all, there's no harm in using one for searching purposes, even if they choose to apply test optional. You're just using all the information you have to do research. And if you want to convert the GPA to an SAT and ACT score, I can give you, this is one website that does it. They also have that on that same website. They have a conversion from a GPA to an SAT, and you're just going to kind of use a range to estimate what your students' test scores might be. So with that test score in mind or in hand, whether it's an actual test score that they might submit, or whether it's just an estimate, I would start there and search by where that test score is, like which schools places that test score in this 75th percentile or higher. So let's go with an ACT, and then I'm just going to pick an ACT of between 30 and 32. And I'm going to say, show me all the schools with where an ACT of 30 to 32 is in the 75th percentile or above, or in that top 25%. Okay, I'll use an SAT after I do the ACT example. Okay, and then that's it. And so let's search. So looks like there are two full lists, or two full pages, sorry, of schools with that ACT range that's in the top 75th percentile. And where we can go find that is back at the academic stats. And there's a column here that says 75th percentile. We were doing ACT. So I'm going to, and then you can sort it. Okay, so this is now probably from the lowest to highest. So now we're just kind of scrolling through, and just to look, these are all the different schools where that ACT range is in their 75th percentile. So that's half of your search. That's the start of your search, right? So now you've found the school where your student is at the top of the academic range. Now you got to make sure which of these schools actually offer will offer merit scholarships. And where you can find that is you skip to the merit scholarship tab. And let me explain what these columns show you. This is where it tells you, how much merit scholarship those schools offer. So the first column says the freshmen without need. This is just telling you how many students at that school do not have any financial need. That goes back to that calculation we looked at. Cost of attendance minus EFC equals need. So for example, so Hanover College says that only 21% of their students do not have financial need. So you can do the reverse and say that 79% of those students have financial need, and hopefully Hanover College is giving those students financial money, need-based aid. We don't know, but that's a hope. But if you kind of skim down, you can see Miami University, which happens to be the school that I used in the example. They are saying that 58% of the students do not have financial need. So 58% of the students either are paying full price or they're getting merit scholarships, because that's the only way that they're going to get money, because they're not getting need-based money. So the next column is freshmen without need receiving merit aid. So let's look at the Miami University example. So we know that 58% of the students do not have financial need. And so they're either paying full price or they're getting merit scholarships. Of those students, 82% of them are receiving merit scholarships. So that shows you that if you're a student from a family that doesn't have financial need, you apply to Miami University, you have a test, an ACT score of between 30 and 32. Hopefully, your application is good and all that type of stuff, and you get accepted, you have a very, very high likelihood that you will be receiving merit scholarship money from Miami University. And then let's move to the next column. Next column tells you what the average amount of money that Miami University offers. And here they're saying, it's a little under $13,000. That's the average. So as you saw, we already looked at their charts. There are some students that were getting more. I think they were at the highest was like 32,000. And then there were some students that were getting less. I think it was 8,000. So on average, they're giving out 13,000, but that doesn't mean if your student is really at that high range, and that's what that chart said, you're definitely going to get more, or they are going to get more. If the student is at the lower end, they are going to get merit scholarships, but they probably get below the average. And then we also have a column, this last blue column, that says if the school gives out a full tuition or full ride scholarship. This is just the link to that page on the school's website. This category that says merit scholarship categories offered, this is also just the link to the web page on the college's website that has all the details about the merit scholarships. But the other section that's interesting to look at, let's go with stick with Miami University, right? Is this tab that says compare offers. This is where we have the crowdsourced offers. So if we go to Miami University and we click on that. So these are the offers that families shared with us last year. We have 3 years worth of data. So last year, 74 families shared with us what their student actually got. The year before it was 85 people. And so you could, if you wanted to, kind of go back to I would probably, honestly, because of the pandemic and everything 2 years ago, like doesn't really matter as much. You could go to last year just to compare. And so here you can look. And again, if you're a family that is getting merit, then you probably want to look in the section where the EFC is honestly 50,000 or higher, or even there's a section where the EFC is above 60,000. So these families, you can see nobody's getting need-based aid. They're all getting merit scholarships. And there's a range here, right? So this student got 25,000. They were from Tennessee. They had a 32, which, you know, is probably at the higher end of Miami University's academic range. This student is from Maryland. They got a 28. So it just, you know, ranges a little bit. You know, and then we also list when they applied. Did they apply early action? Did they apply regular decision? So, you know, this is interesting information. I wouldn't, you know, you can't make decisions based on it, but it kind of is a piece of the puzzle. It's another piece of information that I would look at as I'm pulling together and I'm doing research to find out, you know, which schools have the potential to give my student the most money. Okay, so somebody's asking, what does renewable mean? And so renewable means that is this a scholarship that when it was offered to them that they are going to get for all 4 years. The reason why we have that is we were hoping at some point, which we might be asking people to share private scholarships. And so a lot of times private scholarships aren't renewable. Okay, let me just go back quickly and I'll show you a few more things on College Insights. I'm just going to scan through like section by section and point out what I think is some interesting data that people should be aware of. Of course, so here in this first section is a percent of undergraduates that are men versus women. You will find that there are some schools that are heavy, you know, accepting men or lean towards accepting women. And if your student is of the opposite sex of whatever the heavy percentage is, then they might have an advantage. So that might be a reason why you'd want to look at the percentage of men versus women. It just might be that little extra hook for, you know, why they might have a better chance of getting in than somebody else. Student faculty ratio, of course, you know, that gives you an idea, but actually, but the more important number or data here is are these two fields: sophomore retention and 4-year graduation rate. So sophomore retention means what percentage of the students, what percentage of freshmen are returning sophomore year. Hopefully, you know, a majority of the students are. I think that the average is 82%. So you know, that's just something to kind of keep in your mind. So if you do see a school that's on the lower side, like 74%, I would be, you know, a little cautious, or I would actually ask a lot of questions to admissions. Like, you know, for example, is there a reason that maybe there was like, you know, 1 year that happened? But so I would use this to kind of like see if there's anything you need to be asking more questions and ask deeper questions about what's going on at the college. The other column here is 4-year graduation rate. You'd think, well, you know, that's kind of basic information. It is, and it isn't, ironically. A lot of college search sites only give you the 6-year graduation rate because that's the only number that the government requires colleges to share. A lot of college websites only have the 6-year graduation rate. But, you know, don't we all think the 4-year graduation rate is what's important? Because if your student does not graduate in 4 years and they need to do a 5th year, that 5th year is very expensive because we've all been talking about merit scholarships. Merit scholarships are for 4 years. that merit scholarship is not going to be for the 5th year. If your student has to do a 5th year, it's probably at full price unless they're getting need-based aid, which we have already determined majority of the people here are not going to get need-based aid. So understanding a 4-year graduation rate is really important. I would obviously be concerned just looking at the numbers of a school where only 54% of the students are graduating in 4 years. I mean, I don't know what the average is offhand, I have to tell you. Personally, my child, I want it to be 70% or higher that students are graduating in 4 years. So that's a really important number to look at. There are a few schools that are outliers that the graduation rate is really good, but the 4-year graduation rate doesn't show that. And those schools tend to be schools with co-op programs because co-ops usually students are going to school for 4 years, but it's spread out over 5 years because of the co-ops and internships that they're doing. So for example, if we looked up Northeastern, they may not even share their 4-year graduation rate because it's really low because of the co-ops. A lot of students are graduating in 5 years. So that's one situation. And then another one is if a school tends to have a lot of engineering or STEM majors, those programs do tend to go for 5 years. And so that might pull down the 4-year graduation rate. So again, these are all, I look at this as pieces of a puzzle. And if there's a number that kind of just like, alerts you, then it doesn't mean, scrap the college. It just means that you need to ask more questions and you need to research a little bit more about why that number is what it is. And hopefully the admissions officers should be able to give you more insight. Okay, we've kind of looked at this academic section. We have the average high school GPA, we have average SATs, we have the 75th percentile SATs, average ACT 75th percentile, so you can use the search preferences to look at schools this way. You can, sort all the schools and see, where they fall in terms of average and 75th percentile. But this is useful information, particularly for the juniors. If you have a student who, we use this phrase chasing merit. If you have a student where you really need to find the schools that are going to give the most merit, it could be if your student can increase their test score by a point or two or by 50 points or so on an SAT, might make a difference in getting them into the 75th percentile of a school that offers them more money. Okay, does study abroad participation greatly affect the student's ability to graduate in 4 years? It usually does not, but it does. It might impact your individual student's ability, but it's not going to be enough of an impact that it would impact the school's overall 4-year graduation rate numbers. Okay, admission stats. This is a section I didn't touch on yet, which I personally find interesting. So we list the overall admission number, but maybe some of you realize or don't realize that number can mask what's really going on at that school. And so what I mean by that, I'm going to sort this field and I'll show you. Okay. No, sorry. Okay, so let's look at Trinity College. So their overall admission rate is 36%. So that means if you looked at, how many applications they got, whether they got them early decision or regular decision, and how many students did they accept, their overall rate is 36%. But so that's, you think it's selective, and it is. But if you look at their early decision rate, they are actually taking 60% of the students who apply early decision. So clearly, if your student, has stats and is interested in this school, they kind of could get a little bit of an advantage if they apply early decision. So Trinity overall accepts 36%, but they're accepting 60% if you apply early decision. And then the other number I would look at is this column that says class filled early decision. And they are filling their 55% of their class. They're filling over half their class by accepting students' early decision. So what that means for your student, if they were interested in Trinity College, is their best chance of getting in is probably applying early decision. And they can apply regular decision. It is going to be much more competitive. So if, again, you look at the regular decision rate is in this column. And so for Trinity, if they applied early decision, there's a 60% chance they'll be accepted. If they apply regular decision, it's a 34% chance. So this is where you can look at these numbers and make decisions relative to whether or not your student wants to apply early decision. Obviously, they can only pick one school to apply early decision. With everything we talked about tonight, I would strongly encourage you to make sure you can afford the one school that they can apply early decision, because if they do get in, you're expected that they will go. So the question is, early decision binding? It pretty much is. We actually did a whole session on that. If you go to the Road to College YouTube page, there's a great recording. We did it in August. It was with Ron Lieber, New York Times journalist, and Nancy Gressemeyer, who's a really experienced college consultant. And we discussed, is early decision binding? There's nothing legal. They can't sue you. Students can back out, but it's really a question of ethically binding. And I think it should be binding in that if you do your research and you determine that the school is affordable and your student goes, then they should, and they get accepted. If your student applies, they get accepted, then they should go. If you can't determine whether the school is affordable because maybe the school doesn't provide enough information or the net price calculators are poor, and then your student applies and then they get in and what they offer you, you can't make it affordable, then I think then that's okay to back out. But if you've done it, you should do your research before. And I would say most cases, students agree to go. There's a small percentage of cases where it turns out that the offer that's being offered early decision is not affordable, and then the school, and quite honestly, in that cases, the family goes back and say, obviously my student wants to go because they applied early decision, but this isn't affordable. The school at that point can decide, is there anything more that they can offer? And they might adjust the package or they might not, and then they won't be, they don't, you have the right to walk away. Do you know the ED versus RD acceptance rates for Duke, Carnegie Mellon, and Princeton? Yeah, they should all be in here. If you look, so they're probably not going to be on this list because of the SAT, ACT scores I put in, but those schools should all be in here. Okay. And then we have deadlines, which again is important. You might want to look to see what deadline is coming up for early decision. Most early decisions are November 1st. There's actually a fair number that are also November 15th, small percentage are October 15th. So as I've mentioned this whole time, deadlines are really important. You miss a deadline, a college is just not going to accept the application. They've got too much demand. For the schools that are in demand, they're just going to say, deadline was the deadline. That would be a horrible thing to miss just because you weren't aware of the dates. And then there's a section here, just like there was a section on merit scholarships, we have a section on need-based aid. So if you determine that you do fall into that category where you might have financial need, then you would want to find a school that's going to meet that need. So here's this column that says, what percentage of your need does the school meet? So let's look here. So just looking at this list right now, Champlain College, it's in Vermont, says, great, you have need, but we can only meet 78% of that need. So let's go back to the example I gave. If the cost of attendance is $60,000, your EFC is 30, your need is 30,000. Champlain College said, we will give you money, but we will only give you 78% of that 30,000 that you need. So you're not gonna get your full need met. But Trinity College says, I will give you 100% of your need met. So of course, ideally you want to find, if you have need, you want to find the schools that are offering 100% because that is going to be your best situation. So again, for the families that have financial need, these columns, these percentages are very important. And then, the compare offers, this is all the crowdsource information. Costs, these are, in-state, out-of-state cost of tuition. The average net price, we have it in here. This is from the government. It just, again, is a conglomeration. It's the average. It's across, everybody's different price points. It's interesting to look at. I don't use it that much in my research, but we have it in here because some people like to know about it. We have a link to the college's net price calculator. You should definitely do every college's net price calculator. Some of them are more accurate than others, but you should at least have that information. And then we have some information on debt for the schools, like the average loans and what the average Parent Plus loan is that students take out. And that's to me, this is other government information, but I don't use it as much. So I hope this was useful. Let me go back. Okay, yes, there's a question here. What year is the data from? Let me go to my slide because I did have, that was the one slide I didn't show you, which I should have. Here it is. Okay, so data used in College Insights. I mentioned it's common data set, the government crowdsourced data. So the common data set is the most recent common data set is what they call from the year 2021 to 2022. It came out this summer. And that is data for students who enrolled in school in the fall of 2021. So it's students who started college last fall. And so it's actually for the admissions data for those students when they got into college. So it is not the admissions data that just happened. It's the admissions data from a year ago. That's actually all the data that everybody has. And the reason is that a lot of the data in the common data set is based on students who enroll. They don't know who enrolls into the fall, right? And so once the students enroll, then they base that data on, that's what the common data set information is based on. It takes them months to pull the information together, because if you ever look at a common data set, there's, over 100 or, pieces of data. And then the common data set information isn't usually shared until the spring or the summer of after the fall that the students started school. That's just the cycle of the data. Hope that was helpful. Okay, what's the third component that College Insights uses to build this database? I heard government. Okay, so hopefully you saw the screen, PJ. So there is common data set, which is what the colleges share. There is government data from iPads. And the third is what we call crowdsourced data, which is unique to us. This is the data. This is all the offer information that we have asked families to share over the past 3 years. So it's actual offers that students received. So what's the subscription cost of College Insights? It is $24.99 a month. You can use it for 1 month. You can use it for 2 months. I mean, I'll tell you, probably, depending on the time of year of which people come in to use it, but the average number of months is usually 3 months. But depending, some people like to make their lists in there, they keep it longer. You could use it for a month and, just, do all of your research that you need and then get out. One feature is that we actually save your data. So if you use it for a month and then you cancel, let's say you're a family with a junior, you want to do some research, you use it for a month, you cancel, and then you come back like 6 months later, we will actually still have your list. So that's another way that you can use it. Do they give merit scholarship packages early decision? Good question. Yes, they do. Do they give the same amount of merit scholarship if you apply early versus you apply regular decision? I can't really answer that definitively. Some schools might, but other schools might not. And again, I always think of this as a business. So if your student applied early decision I'm the admissions officer. I only have a set amount of money that I can give out. Your student has applied early decision. They've raised their hand. They said, I'm really interested in coming. That's why I'm applying early decision. If I only have a set amount of money, I might give them money, but I might not give them as much money as I'm going to save and use for the students who are applying regular decision. I am not saying all colleges do that, but unfortunately, we don't know those policies. So the answer is your students should get merit scholarship money if they apply early decision. Whether they'll get the same or not, it is really hard to say. This is really excellent. Is there any plans for a mobile app? Yes, we have been working on the mobile app. Quite honestly, if you were a family, a junior family, we actually sent out an email to the class of 2024. I think it was this past weekend, because we were asking for volunteers who wants to actually be in our beta group. We're going to have the mobile app ready in a few weeks. So we may not have it ready for your seniors, but we will definitely have it ready for your juniors. And what I can promise for the seniors is we will have it ready, a mobile version for when we collect the offers, we call it compare offers. That's actually really good information. When your student starts getting in offers, you can share it to our compare. It's going to be part of College Insights, but it's called Compare Offers. And then you can see what other students anonymously, you see what other students at the same school are being offered. So that actually gives you an idea of, did your student get the best offer, or should they go back and appeal? But that's a whole other discussion. That's a whole nother session. But so we will definitely have mobile version ready for the juniors. We might have it for the seniors, but the compare offers will be mobile friendly in December. Okay. Let's see. So somebody asked, are the results downloadable in Excel? They are not, as of now, downloadable. Again, in this newer version that we're working on, which will be mobile friendly, we are going to make an option where you can share your results with Excel, Google Sheets. That's going to be available, but unfortunately, right now, it's not. Okay, so the question here is the amount given. I'm sure that you're talking about College Insights. Is that for a semester or for the academic year? It's for the academic year. So the numbers that are listed were all for the academic year. How do I filter lists by? Okay, I think I showed that by merit scholarships. Okay, well, it is 8 after 10. It's been a long night. I will look through these questions to see if there are any themes that bubble up. Hopefully you found this interesting and worthwhile and helpful. And honestly, whether you use College Insights or not, it's fine. Hopefully you got knowledge about the process from tonight. You got ideas about how you should be searching. And all I want for people is that you build, that you do research, that you understand the process, that you have a good sense of what the colleges are going to cost before your student applies, and that you and your student have options, at the end of the day. So that's what I wish and I hope for all of you. Okay. Good night, everybody. We will send the recording tomorrow, and I will look through the questions to see if there's anything else that jumps out at me that I will try and answer. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Good night.